Welcome to the G5 Huddle. The College Huddle is the largest fan-led sports podcast community on the internet. The College Huddle offers its members a network of other podcasts and content creators to work with, giving our audiences more in-depth content. If you're interested in more college football coverage, then I highly recommend you go and follow the College Huddle on X at College Huddle, our YouTube channel at the College Huddle Podcast, and visit the website, thecollegehuddle.com, where you'll find articles and information from our 70-plus college athletic-focused podcast. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And finally, if you're listening in podcast form, please rate and review. I am your host, Justice, and Luke is still on vacation this week. And as I mentioned last week, I have another special episode planned and a special guest for tonight. As I mentioned last week as well, we're in kind of a slow news period right now. Portal commitments have slowed down dramatically. Just news in general is pretty much non-existent, but that should change starting with this week. A matter of fact, some fall camps, I believe, start up the 24th, and the majority of them start next week on the 29th. So there'll be a lot of news here coming soon. But I figured it'd be a great time to introduce you all to something that you're likely not familiar with. Last week, we brought you College Fantasy Football with Jared Palmgren and Chasing the Natty. This week, we'll be introducing you to Campus to Canton Fantasy Leagues. I have been playing in Campus to Canton Leagues for about 4 years now, and I tell you, I truly enjoy the challenge they offer. It's something different from NFL fantasy and even college fantasy, just another layer of strategy involved, and something that I truly enjoy. Tonight's guest is one of the founding members of Campus to Canton, the company, and the number one source for all your Campus to Canton League needs. From articles, rankings, tools, a Discord, and multiple weekly podcasts, they have you covered. He is the co-host of Campus Life, the premier podcast on the Campus to Canton podcast feed. He is a diehard Penn State Nittany Lions fan, but we won't hold that against him tonight. He is Colin Decker, and he can be found on X at C2C Decker. You can find Campus to Canton on X at Campus, the number 2 Canton, or on their website at Campus, the number 2 Canton.com. Welcome to the show, Colin.
Thanks, Justice. Stoked to be here, man. We go back a little bit. We've known each other for a little while, been in some leagues together, but hyped to be on your show here.
Well, why don't you tell the people a little bit about yourself and Campus to Canton, the company?
So I started fantasy content at the same time I was really starting Campus to Canton Leagues. It was probably about 4 or 5 years ago at this point. It was right pre-pandemic. So, there was really nothing out there already for like C2C leagues. There was some college fantasy stuff you could find. CFF site had some great stuff. You can find articles and things at Fantrax, but there wasn't really anything for a Campus to Canton league. So a friend of mine that I've known for a while, Austin Nace, my co-host, we decided to start a podcast up and then started up a website, and one thing led to another. And, we've I think done an admirable job growing this, the format and really generating a lot more interest around Campus to Canton leagues out there specifically.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, I've been with the company. I guess this will be in the start of my 3rd year.
I think so.
And yeah, the growth has been tremendous. The amount of information, the tools, the articles. I mean, it's been pretty awesome to be a part of it. And it's without a doubt the go-to place for Campus to Canton leagues. Before we get into what Campus to Canton is, I do have a few news items I wanted to share, and most of them actually came out yesterday or this morning. And unfortunately, they're not very positive, but that's the way it goes sometimes. The first piece is Hawaii wide receiver Stephen McBride was arrested and charged with felony abuse. I believe that happened this morning in Hawaii, and as a result, he has been suspended from team activities indefinitely. And then late last night, word broke that current Utah State and former New Mexico State football player Andre Selden Jr. Passed away in a drowning incident. Our thoughts are with his family and friends and the Utah State and New Mexico State football teams. And then lastly, Jacksonville State adds Auburn to their 2026 football schedule. Obviously, they're going to be playing at Auburn, but it's always good to see a G5 get a matchup with the P5 and a potential to kind of take down Goliath. That's kind of what Luke and I really like to see, and so awesome to see Jacksonville State get that opportunity.
Yeah, and we saw it happen. Auburn get taken down just this past year, so they could be ripe for another upset. Who knows?
Absolutely, New Mexico State and Jerry Kill and Diego Pavia took them down, and it's going to be that whole transition to Vanderbilt. I think is going to be interesting, right? Because pretty much, I don't want to say the whole team, but they took a lot of players and a lot of the coaching staff over to Vanderbilt from New Mexico State, and so be interesting to see how that transition works from them playing in the SEC on a weekly basis for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get right into it. What are Campus to Canton Leagues?
So that's a great question. We actually have a page on our website dedicated to what is C2C, because that's a question we get a lot. But just a quick summary, it's probably the most immersive fantasy football experience you get out there. You manage both a college team and an NFL team, and it's basically an NFL dynasty. Traditional there, you have your rookies, your players, you have them all the way up through the end of their career. You also have the college side where, you're getting these guys coming in as freshmen up until they graduate, up until they leave school. So it's kind of like a CFF dynasty team, but they're separate teams until those players graduate college. Once they graduate college, they leave college, they move to your NFL team, they move directly to your NFL team. So you have these guys from the time they're freshmen all the way up until the end of their career, till they hang it up. So that's kind of where Campus to Canton comes from campus all the way up until Canton Hall of Fame. So it's both college and NFL dynasty merged into one.
Absolutely. And so, like, folks, if you hear us say the word C2C, that's just an acronym for Campus to Canton. And like Colin said, that's the easiest way to describe it is it's a college fantasy football dynasty league and an NFL fantasy football dynasty league kind of wrapped all into one. Last week, we kind of covered college fantasy football. Both college fantasy football and Campus to Canton aren't what I would consider mainstream, right? They certainly don't have the attention that NFL fantasy football does. And so just thought it'd be a good idea to kind of, there's a lot of people that play NFL fantasy football. And for me and others that maybe are huge college football fans, college fantasy football is a great way to kind of play the fantasy football game, but in the sport that you love. And then Campus to Canton League just kind of combine the two. But there are some important things to consider when you're playing in a C2C league versus just a straight college fantasy football type league or an NFL fantasy football league. I feel like a lot of folks probably play in NFL. Those are redraft leagues, right? Mm-hmm. That probably gets the most the common type that the majority of fans play in, but these leagues are more similar to your dynasty leagues where you own the player. In this case, you own the player from the time he signs a letter of intent till in theory until he makes it to the Hall of Fame, right? And so it's even a little bit longer than your quote normal even college dynasty league where you only have the guy for at most 4 years.
Yeah. So, I mean, you really build, I don't want to say you build an attachment to these players because obviously we don't actually know them. I mean, I know you and Luke have been doing a great job on the G5 Hive, like actually getting to know some of these guys, interviewing them. That's been phenomenal. But for the most of us, we don't have like an actual relationship with them. But you still get kind of attached to these guys. You find that 3-star freshman who came in to Ole Miss as a running back, and all of a sudden they blow up their freshman year. And obviously I'm talking about Quinshon Judkins, you had him as a freshman, and now you're like, he's one of the top running backs guy first, so the NFL side, a lot of the NFL content creators are really, heavily into the rookies, and a lot of them, plant flags on rookies and things like that. But we've had our flags planted on these guys for even longer.
And that's a great point. And I actually hadn't even considered talking about it tonight, but the recruiting aspect, right?
Yeah.
In terms of you know, you have 24/7 on three rivals, etc. But you know, you guys at Campus can't kind of do your own recruiting data, etc., if you will. You have guides, but like you said, you guys will have had Quinshawn Judkins ranked way higher than 24/7 or on three. I'm just trying to think like this year. I guess it would be David Eziomame from Clemson is someone that you guys have rated much higher than the quote traditional recruiting services. And so that's just another thing that you guys offer, that even like if you're not interested in playing campus Canton leagues, but you're interested in like recruiting, like they have all kinds of recruiting data and tools, etc. Why don't you tell the folks a little bit about some of that stuff, Colin?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a dedicated recruiting team over there, solving football on Twitter or on X, and at Big Wide Receiver Guy, at Alfred J Fernandez. Those guys make up the bulk of the recruiting team. They run the Official, which is a recruiting based show where they're running through these guys before their senior year. Currently, they're just kind of making their way down the general consensus ranks amongst on 3 24/7, but we develop our own opinions on these players. And sometimes we get it wrong. We were pretty high on Keon Gray's, a wide receiver who went to Ohio State. We were pretty high on Talon Chetron, a wide receiver who went to Oklahoma State. It didn't necessarily work out. We were also very high on Quinshawn Judkins, Ashton Jeanty, Ali Gordon, some of those types of guys. So we have our hits and misses as well, but I think that our recruiting team does a really good job of incorporating some advanced analytics into these recruiting profiles. We're not going to a lot of these camps that a lot of the other big name recruiting sites are. We've gone to some Elite 11s for the quarterback stuff, but mostly we're kind of relying on film that we find out there and some other analytical and athletic measurable points, and building a profile that way. And I think that's what really separates our recruiting team from the other recruiting teams out there. So if that is something you guys are interested in, we have an athletic comparison tool where we're looking at the athletic profile of these all of the college players, but also the recruits. We have our own recruiting rankings, and some other tools and stuff available.
Yeah, absolutely, and most of it's offensive players only.
Yes, yeah.
But occasionally, like a Nicholas Harbor, right? Someone like that's going to be in there because you didn't know what he was going to do before he came in. Was he going to play offense or defense? But I mean, it's I mean, just for if you're into recruiting, it is definitely some information that you're not going to find anywhere else. They measure in game speed, right?
Yep.
Quarterbacks, was it velocity over expected?
Yep.
And so those are things like you don't see on 24/7 or on 3. And then they have guides. They put out now obviously the guides are geared towards this format, but it's also a great way just to learn about players, specifically the freshman and supplemental guide, which is my personal favorite, where you learn about all these freshmen that you might have seen on 24/7, but it gives you a little more in-depth detail and knowledge.
Yeah, the freshman and supplemental guide is probably my favorite of the 3 guides that we do. I mean, obviously our Devi guide is fantastic. We have a great Devi team over there. We have a great CFF team over there, which you're a part of. You helped to put together that guide for the CFF guide this year. But I think the freshman and supplemental guide is probably my favorite because it's just so much more unique than anything else you can find out there. There's other Devi guides. There are other Devi sites. There's other CFF sites. There's other CFF guides, although I'm a little biased. I don't think that they go quite as deep as our team does. I mean, you guys are some sickos over there, diving into Army and Navy and all of these other teams. But the freshman and supplemental guide is just a truly unique guide that we put out. It's almost like a recruiting guide blended with a guide, like you said, kind of geared towards these campus to Canton leagues.
And so you've heard us mention the word Devi a few times, and Devi comes from developmental, and Devi leagues have existed for a while now. And the big difference between campus Canton leagues and Devi leagues is that Devi leagues, you might draft college players, and I mean, and there are leagues out there, Devy leagues that draft kids still in high school, um, but those kids just kind of stay on a taxi squad, a reserve squad, whatever you want to call it, and you can't actually use them from a fantasy perspective until they make it to your NFL squad and get drafted. I guess, I mean, is it safe to say, I guess, campus can't kind of evolve from the Devy format?
Yeah, I definitely think that's safe to say, because my experience to Canton leagues came from, so I have a background at mostly in NFL dynasty and that kind of area. I've been playing NFL dynasty for probably about 12 years now at this point. And then, you just get a little bit further down the rabbit hole. You're looking into rookies and, you get really into the rookie research. So you want to, start getting a little bit further, getting into the juniors before they come out. And that's kind of how you end up into Devy leagues, getting a little bit further into college. But like you said, you don't get any points for those players. So, if I'm in a Devy league, if I'm drafting Quinshon Judkins, going back to that example from before, I don't get any points when he blows up and has a phenomenal year. And it's awesome to have those players for a Devy perspective and into your NFL pipeline and having them move up. But the reality of it is there's so much that can happen when a player is in college. And it's so difficult to get to the NFL and to be successful in the NFL and to be successful for fantasy in the NFL. It's really difficult to project that. I mean, NFL teams have a hard time doing it. So, if you can do it well, that's great. But there's a lot of players that don't make it, but you still want to get something for them, and you want to get those points that they're scoring week in, week out when they have that big 150-yard game in college. You want those points. So that's, I think, really where the Campus to Canton side evolved. Like you said, just the desire to see an immediate benefit from those college players.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've never played in a Devy format, and I don't think I ever would, just because, like you said, it's you miss out on the college years of those players. And I'm trying to think, the Lattimore, the Marcus Lattimore, the running back from South Carolina, right, had a phenomenal career at South Carolina. Tears his knee up. He does get drafted, but like he's never the same player anymore. And so in a Devy league, you're kind of bummed, right, if you own Marcus Lattimore because of the injury. Whereas at least in a Campus Canton league, you got to see him help your college fantasy football team out there a little bit.
Yeah.
Last week when we talked about college fantasy football, we talked about best ball, basically where you don't have to set a lineup, and that's a format that you can certainly use in Campus to Canton leagues. At least in my experience, has been more used on the college side, not so much on the NFL side, just because NFL, there's lots of information, as we discussed last week. There's injury reports that are mandated, et cetera, whereas on the college side, that doesn't really exist today, with the exception of the Big Ten. But so, and then there's 134 teams you got to worry about versus only 32. So you can use the best ball format in a Campus to Canton league to kind of help you out. But probably the biggest difference between what we talked about last week with college fantasy football and what we're talking about this week in a Campus to Canton league is, as Colin was alluding to earlier, you have to kind of build a pipeline, because that's how you're going to get players on the NFL. And so you have to strike there's a balance, and owner, you'll see that balance. Sometimes there's not a balance, right? You see owners shift all one way or all the other, and trying to figure out, like, hey, this is an NFL player versus someone that's only going to be useful for college fantasy football. I'm trying to like the best example I could think is like a Georgia Bulldogs wide receiver. From a college fantasy football standpoint, like they're pretty useless.
Yeah.
But obviously, Georgia's an SEC, top programs, they get a lot of talent, and they put people in the NFL. And so, you got to strike that balance. When am I going to take this Georgia wide receiver? And he's probably useless to me for college fantasy football, but I need him to kind of build that pipeline to my NFL league.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. That's the most unique part of a Campus to Canton league is striking that balance. And it's really, again, it's one of my favorite things about a Campus to Canton league is you can have so many different strategies and be successful. If you mentioned that some people want to lean all one way or all another way. If you lean all CFF and that's where your focus is, you want to win that college side because there is a championship on that college side. There's a championship on the NFL side. So you can win either side in any given year. It's two leagues that are kind of merged together. So if you win that college side and that's where your focus is, there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. It's going to leave your NFL side pretty hampered because, you're drafting a lot of these guys from the Sun Belt, drafting some, guys who aren't really going to make much of an impact in the NFL. But so it's going to leave your NFL side more barren, but you can still win on the college side, have fun on that side, go the complete opposite direction. You don't really care about the college side at all. You only want to win on the NFL side. So you're only worried about building up the NFL side and getting some of these Georgia wide receivers or running backs from there or Ohio State wide receivers and just building up that NFL side as best you can. That can also be a viable strategy. So the best players I find strike a balance between the two, but there's just so many different strategies that you can follow to be successful. There's no cookie cutter answer out there like there are for a lot of like the NFL side. There's a lot of developed strategies that everybody's following. So the uniqueness of the college side is the Campus Canton League is what I really enjoy.
Absolutely. I mean, for me personally, my strategy is to win both leagues every single year.
That's a pretty good goal.
that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
But you certainly, like you said, you certainly see folks that go all in on the college fantasy side every year, and then folks that go all in from that treat it more like, I guess, a Devy league where they're strictly doing drafting and they want to win the NFL side. And then like you said, that there's nothing wrong with either of those. The one thing I would say is like the NFL side, like it's to me, it's very hard to kind of go to the CFF only side because the CFF side you can compete, the college side you can compete every single year. You might not be able to build a winner in year one from a team that's like, maybe take over a really bad team. But you're going to be there's no reason you can't be competitive every single year on the college side. And so if you lean towards the CFF side or the college fantasy side only, that doesn't translate to the NFL, right? Because not that many players go to the NFL, so it is very important to kind of strike that balance. But like I said, some folks don't enjoy the college side per se, and they really focus on the NFL side, and that's fine as well. It's gives you the freedom to make the choice. You're the general manager, right? And so you get to make those choices and build the teams as you see fit.
Yeah, I think you bring up another really good point too that's worth addressing. Like right here is on the college side, you can compete every single year on the college side, and the reason you can compete every single year on the college side is the way that the league is formatted on that side. So they have on the college side, they have what's called a supplemental draft every year. It kind of mirrors an NFL dynasty rookie draft where you're drafting incoming freshmen or any players that are available on waivers. And you're supplementing your team and filling in those gaps of the players that left the NFL the previous year. But with the college side and with those supplemental drafts, they're traditionally 15 rounds. So your college side, your CFF rosters is usually deeper. It's about 45 is pretty much the average, 45 roster spots. So you have the opportunity to replace a third of your roster every single year. So yeah, you can absolutely be competitive on the college side every single year. It gives you an opportunity to cover up on some of those misses where you went after the guy you thought was going to be the wide receiver one at Hawaii. You went after TMA. I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name. But instead it ends up being Pufeli Ashlock. And, it allows you to cover up that miss there and just take another shot at it the following year. So yeah, a great point. You can always be competitive on the college side.
Yeah, I mean, and that is that college supplemental draft, if you will, it is your opportunity to make a difference on both squads, right? Both your NFL
Right.
squad and your college squad. That's where that's where the money's won, so to speak, or earned, I guess, if you will. Because on the NFL side, the supplemental drafts are extremely scarce. You know, you're drafting guys like Dylan Laub, Ryan Flournoy, Trey Lance. Those guys are like, if you're in a pretty strict C2C league where it's only a one copy league, like those guys are the 1.1 overall draft pick. So that it dries up really really quick, and so it's important to know that those the NFL side does have those supplementals. They're typically smaller. Especially in a one copy league, it's usually only 3 rounds, but the pickings are extremely, extremely slim in terms of being able to add to your roster, unless maybe you do have that 1.1 and you're able to get whoever the top FCS player is. But they do have multi copy leagues, which personally, I think that's I think the best way to go for a C2C league. Because I feel like if when you turnover in the leagues, right? If you're trying to fill spots, if you take over a team that the NFL team is just really really bad, you're basically going to be donating your league fee for a really long time. And so when the league's a multi-copy league, and what we mean by multi-copy is like there's 2 folks that own Josh Allen, 2 folks that own Patrick Mahomes. So the supplemental drafts, it gives you a way to kind of build that NFL roster back much quicker than you would in a single copy league.
Yeah, and like you said, that's my favorite format for Campus to Canton League as well. And another one of the things with Campus to Canton Leagues is it is a newer format, so there's not as much consensus out there on league settings. Waivers is a big one, which we can get into a little bit later. But with the multi-copy format, that is my favorite way to do it. Single copy on the college side, and then multi-copy on the NFL side, because like you said, it does give you an opportunity to rebuild your NFL side a little bit easier, and it makes those NFL supplemental rookie drafts mean a little bit more. If somebody on your other side has Caleb Williams, it gives you the opportunity to draft Caleb Williams, even though he was already owned in college, or Marvin Harrison Jr. You have an opportunity to get some of these top guys, whereas maybe somebody had drafted Caleb Williams in their college supplemental draft in the first round when he was a freshman, and they had him all the way up through, and you just never really had a shot at it. So I think the multi-copy makes it a lot more fun for me, but that does add another layer of complexity where if this is your first time with that league, it might be a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, you mentioned waivers, and I would say that's probably the one thing that's, since I've been in Campus Canton Leagues, has kind of really struck me as like being so odd, or folks are really entrenched on this, right? And like one thing, like you always say, well, the godfather of C2C, I don't even know who this person is, but these people will defend whoever this person is that wrote these bylaws, I don't know, 6 years ago, and say, well, this is the way you're supposed to do it. And like I've never ever experienced that in any other fantasy format, whether it be college, NFL, basketball, whatever, like where some people are so beholden to what this guy wrote as a set of rules, I don't know, 5-6 years ago. And waivers is probably the biggest one. And so some leagues are very limited on waivers, where you can only add one player on the college side. And that's the other thing that puzzles me. Like NFL side, like they don't give a crap. But the college side, they're like, oh no, you can only add one person, and you can only do it in week 4, and you can only do it in week 9. And I don't know. It just I guess the passion for whoever this Godfather guy was, or whoever, I don't even know who it is that wrote these bylaws. Like it fascinates me to a certain extent because folks are so beholden, especially to the waiver rules on the college side. And I don't know, it just really baffles me every time I see it come up, because it comes up a lot.
It does. Waivers is definitely one of the biggest points of contention amongst people in the campus to Canton community. You know, everybody has a different opinion on the way it should be done, and I think you should do what you think is best. Personally, I think having open waivers is the best way to do it. Just, making it like a normal league, like an NFL dynasty league has open waivers at any point in time. Same thing with other NFL leagues, college fantasy football leagues, assuming it's not a best ball league, open all year long on the college side. So I think that's the best way to do it. But I do want to acknowledge that it can be pretty daunting if you're coming from the NFL side, joining a campus to Canton league. The college side can be overwhelming at times. You're going from 32 teams now to 134 teams. You have to balance, like we said before, the college fantasy points you're going to get from a player versus their NFL production. And you might not be as familiar with some of these MAC offenses at Bowling Green. They look like they're going to have a pretty nice offense this year. You might not know who Harold Fannin is. You might not know who Terrian Stewart is. Whereas somebody who has more experience on that side does know those players. They know the offenses to target and the systems to target. So it can give them a pretty big advantage if you do have open waivers, completely open. So I do want to acknowledge that for beginners, it can be beneficial to limit waivers. My personal preference as a way to do that is one of two ways. Either one, $100 in fab can be spent whenever you want, however you want. That provides a lot of freedom. No $0 bids, because I just personally don't believe in $0 bids. But, other than that, you spend it however you want. You can spend up and spend $99 on that top player on the free agent wire. You can just chunk it out and buy and get smaller players, however you want to do it, or one pickup per week. I think either one of those still allows you to have some flexibility with waivers. It still allows you to take advantage of, watching some of these Sunbelt games and identifying who the number one wide receiver for South Alabama is going to be this year. Is it going to be Devin Boston? Is it going to be Jamal Pritchett? You could pick up whichever one, assuming they're on waivers, if you're paying attention. So it rewards those owners who pay attention while not necessarily punishing new owners who might feel a little overwhelmed.
Yeah, I'm a fan of, like you said, I agree with you. I'm a fan of the unlimited, and the best way to kind of add some limits, to my opinion, is kind of like you do you have a budget every year, and then once you spend that budget, you're kind of out. And to your point, like the argument that's used for not having that is the argument that you pointed out, is that well, it benefits the experienced player, and I wouldn't say it doesn't. But I would also say that same player has the advantage from the get-go, right?
Yes.
So even in the draft, like, if I'm drafting with you, I'm going to have that same advantage of knowing the G5, regardless of you have limited or unlimited waivers. The difference is in season, as you're learning, now you can, Jared and I talked about last week, you can, in most college leagues, whether it be just straight college fantasy or even C2C, you can, if you had if we gave you free reign week 1 to build a roster out of waivers, you could build a roster that could win the league, and that's very different from the NFL, just because people come out of nowhere. And so, when you limit the waivers, you're also limiting this guy that doesn't have very much knowledge to begin with, right? And he doesn't really have the opportunity to improve his team throughout the season, and that's a really big thing on the college side. So while, yes, I mean, an experienced player is going to have an advantage, but I don't think you're necessarily giving them any more advantage than they already inherently have. And you're actually doing a disservice to the new guy, because now he can't, he doesn't know what he doesn't know. And as he learns, he can't take advantage of that again until another year. And so, I think the unlimited waivers or waivers with a budget really helps the new folks kind of, it helps them stay involved, but also helps them see, hey, I can turn this team around and potentially win the league just based on waiver pickups.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. I do tend to skew more towards the unlimited waivers. And I think you brought up a really valid point that, the experienced player has the advantage from the get-go. If this is your first C2C league, you're diving into this startup draft, it's 45 rounds, you're gonna miss players. Everybody is going to miss on players in a 45-man draft. It's inevitable. Especially depending on how early in the offseason you do it. Because if you're doing it around now, you have a lot more information than we did at the beginning of spring. So, it doesn't matter when you hold it. It doesn't matter, who it is in the draft. You're going to miss on some players, and the waivers give you an opportunity to make up for some of those misses. The newer players are going to miss more. It's just the way it's going to go. It takes a little bit to learn the system, just like when you're first starting dynasty leagues, be the same thing. A dynasty NFL leagues be the same thing. But the unlimited waivers, like you said, does give you an advantage to pick up these players who are going off in any given week. And even if you're just not even necessarily paying attention, watching all these games, you just go into Fantrax, which is currently the only place you can play season-long college fantasy football. Go into Fantrax, go into the open players available on waivers, hit sort by fantasy points. Now you can see who's doing well this year, and you can just pick right off the top of that list, and it gives you an opportunity to cover up for some of those mistakes very, very easily. So I do prefer unlimited waivers, but I understand the argument of mildly limiting them at the beginning.
So there's one thing that I feel like is like probably the most difficult thing, even for me, and maybe you feel the same way in terms of in-campus Canton leagues, and that's trading assets. It's easy when you're doing one for one. Like, I'm trading this NFL player for this NFL player, or this college player for this college player, right? Because you're talking the same language, so to speak, comparing apples and apples. But when you're trading assets in a C2C league, particularly when you're trading, you're mixing college and NFL. That's just a very difficult thing. That takes. I guess there's some nuance to it, and I don't know. I always find it very difficult, even for myself, to evaluate what the true value of a player is when comparing across the NFL versus college and vice versa.
Yeah, I completely agree. This is probably the most difficult part of Campus to Canton leagues is trading across leagues. You have to think about it as one giant team. I know there are two leagues that are separate. We talked about that before. You get a championship on the college side. You can get a championship on the NFL side. But it truly is one giant team. So you can trade some NFL guys for some college guys. You can trade some college guys for some NFL side guys. And that's how you can kind of swing in season. Like, okay, my NFL side, it's not quite what I wanted it to be this year. I'm not looking like a real contender, but my college side's looking really strong. Let me go get one more piece, two more pieces, and really put my team over the top on the college side and try and win that one. But like you alluded to, it's really difficult to value the players across. Like, if you're going out and you're going to get, let's say it's Torrey Horton this year, looks like he could be a really good college wide receiver, has been a really good college wide receiver, maybe a little bit of Devi potential, but how do you judge that versus a player on the college side, or on the NFL side, like a Hollywood Brown or a Tyler Lockett or something like that? How do you judge those players? It's really, really difficult. Everybody kind of has their own strategy for it. I think you can do a lot of damage, though, if you don't necessarily know what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, Austin, I think Austin's biggest point, and it's absolutely true, is like, especially when you don't know what you're doing, don't be trading NFL assets and only getting college assets in return. That's probably the biggest, I guess, roadblock or pitfall, if you will. And I would agree with that. because I think, when you don't quite understand that, you can get your NFL squad in trouble really, really quick.
Yeah.
But you guys have something that I guess we came out last year, called the C200 rankings.
Yes.
And that kind of is an overall ranking, if you will, of both, or the top, I guess, 200 of NFL and college fantasy assets, or for a C2C league, and like that's really the only thing I know of, that's available to kind of help when you try to evaluate these trades, and that only is going to help you with the top 200 guys, right? But I think the value in it is you can kind of see like some guys like that you might not necessarily know the value of, like you said, a Tyler Lockett, or like lower end NFL assets, kind of at least should give you some perspective on how you should be valuing those guys.
Yeah. Our C200 rankings are our cornerstone rankings. So a lot of other sites out there, DLF, I know for sure, has cornerstone dynasty rankings where they'll incorporate some rookies in there and kind of give you an idea of how to value those players together. And we kind of try to do the same thing where we're combining NFL and college players into a top 200 list. It's an aggregate of several different rankers, so you're getting a different opinions kind of all merged into one, and that is really the only resource out there like that I'm aware of. But that's because it is really difficult to do, especially once you get beyond those top 200, because it does really depend on what your goal is for the trade. So my biggest piece of advice, Austin's, is always don't trade NFL studs for college only pieces. Very, very valuable resource, or a rule guideline to go by. Mine is always to have a goal in mind with this trade. What do I want this trade to do for me? Do I want this trade to help me win this college side? Do I want this trade to help me win the NFL side? Am I struggling on both? And do I want this trade to give me an opportunity to rebuild my NFL side? So whatever your goal is, go into the trade with that mindset and make sure you make your team better for whichever one of those goals you have. So if you do that, you're going to miss, you're going to get some things wrong. I've done it for sure. And trades are always fluctuating on the college side too. Sometimes it looks really good, sometimes it looks really bad, and then it pivots. So just as long as you have your goal in mind, you should end up figuring it out and getting to a point where you're winning more often than you're losing.
Before we move on to where folks can play Campus Canton, are there any other insights or considerations you think folks should know about or understand in a Campus Canton league?
I think we covered a lot of them, and I think covering the waiver argument too, without going too in depth. This is more of a high level show here, introductory, but that's one of the bigger ones. Talking about the differences between the supplemental drafts, I think, is really important too. The last thing that I'll note on it, and this is a Fantrax specific thing, which we'll get into Fantrax in a moment, but it's, if you're not going to use best ball on the college side, I do recommend using the auto sub feature that Fantrax has out. And this is, some people are against it, some people are for it. I really like the auto sub feature because what it does is you on game day, you have to set a list of subs in priority order. And if for whatever reason your one player doesn't play that week, I got burned with it. Zach Charbonnet 2 years ago for UCLA, there was no news that he was going to sit out. You didn't even know he was sitting out until 10 minutes after kickoff. And now all of a sudden he's in my lineup and I'm taking a 0. This auto sub feature will prevent that. So if they don't play any snaps at all and you didn't know it and they're in your lineup, it'll sub in one of your priority guys from your auto subs in to take that place to make sure you don't take a 0. So that's something that I really am a big advocate for. I think that's a fantastic feature that Fantrax put out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one we didn't even mention last week when we talked CFF. And they have two choices for that auto sub feature. One choice is, I'll call it a de facto best ball, which I think is not a good option because, someone that's more strategic, and if they knew Zach Charbonnet wasn't going to play, they would specifically put him in the lineup That way, they don't have to make a choice, and they know that they got whoever the highest points total is. But I agree with you. The best option is the one where you have to rank players. So you're forcing owners to at least go in and make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
The only, I guess, it's not a negative. It's just the way the system is. The only thing I don't like about it is, when we get to November and there's Tuesday night action, you have to have that. You have to have that ranking done on Tuesday. Once any college football game starts that week, it's locked. So that is, I guess, that is a negative to it, but it definitely beats the alternative, like you said, of taking a 0. So where to play college or campus Canton leagues? Last week we mentioned that on the college fantasy football, really the only option is Fantrax, and this past week Underdog did come out with their version of college fantasy football, but that is, it's essentially it's best ball only. It's no dynasty, and it's only Power 4 schools, so it wouldn't be applicable to a campus to Canton type league.
Right.
So once again, really the only option is Fantrax for the college side. But the NFL side, you have in theory you can play anywhere you play NFL fantasy football. Now Fantrax is clearly the only site that offers you the ability to play both on the same software format. But they're definitely not the most popular. I would say Sleeper and then My Fantasy League or MFL are probably the two most popular options. If you're in a multi-copy league, then the only options for you are My Fantasy League or Fantrax.
Mm-hmm.
Sleeper does not offer multi-copy leagues. And from a customization standpoint, I would say Fantrax and My Fantasy League offer the most options in terms of customizing scoring, and position specific scoring, etc. I don't know if anybody plays campus Canton leagues on like ESPN or Yahoo, but I don't know why you couldn't.
Mm-hmm. The ESPN and Yahoo aren't open all year round, so that's the big knock on those sides of things. I mean, I know a lot of people do really like playing on ESPN or Yahoo because that's where they're more familiar with for redraft or whatever. But you're right. Sleeper, My Fantasy League, Fantrax are the most common. Sleeper probably number one. My Fantasy League, I feel like people are kind of skewing away from that one just because the layout and the format feels a little bit outdated. Still by far the best for customization, not even close for My Fantasy League, the others. And then I feel like Fantrax has a pretty good marriage of the two of them with it's not as new age and flashy as Sleeper, but it does offer more customization. It doesn't offer as much customization as MFL, but it does look better and actually has a working app. So those are the three big ones for the NFL side. I always advocate for people to play wherever they want. Fantrax does have the ability you can play both. You can play your NFL side and your college side on one app, and it's two separate leagues, but it is still in one app. So that is nice. They do have a feature on there as well that's in beta for Devi, where you can have college players on your NFL team. I have not tried this out yet because you'd still essentially have two leagues and you would still kind of have to run it as two leagues. But it is an interesting feature that I think is worth exploring as they're, working through any kinks and things like that as it's in beta. But something you noted to me in the conversation the other day that I didn't realize is that Fantrax offers multi-copy leagues. So that's something else that I'm going to explore as well.
Yeah, and I guess one big advantage to Fantrax over MFL is it's free.
Yes.
MFL, and I think that's why a lot of people gravitate towards Sleeper. Sleeper's free.
Mm-hmm.
From my perspective, I do a lot of my stuff on an actual computer. And
Mm-hmm.
Sleeper is terrible on a computer.
Yeah.
The app is great, but on an actual PC, Sleeper is not so great. But Fantrax, offers like Sleeper is free. And so I think that's a big advantage they have over MFL. I believe MFL, if you get the early bird pricing, is like $80 a league. But then if you don't, I think it goes up to like 100, somewhere around there. So that is a consideration. But like you said, you can play on ESPN or Yahoo. The problem being there is like your in season movement. You'd have to track that somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because you won't be able to trade those assets until the league quote renews, which will be sometime in the summer.
Yeah.
One big point we didn't talk about earlier, and this kind of goes along with the software, and you kind of touched on it a little bit, is you have to treat these things like two different leagues. There is, even on Fantrax where you can play them both, you can't just hit a button and move players from one league from the college side to the NFL side. That is a very manual process that your commissioner has to do. But nobody offers that. Hopefully, someone will at some point. Fantrax.
The Fantrax is the closest.
Yeah, they're the only ones that offer the college side. So, but that you do have to manually, or your commissioner has to manually move those players when they do get move up to the NFL. If folks are interested and want to join a league, where would you suggest they do that to find one?
Yeah, it's still not very easy to find one. Twitter, you can search on Twitter. That's definitely an option. People are always starting up leagues, but at the risk of being overly biased, I think the best place to find them is in the Campus to Canton website's Discord. We have a specific channel in there for finding a league. We have multiple openings running at all different times, whether they're startups or orphaned teams or whatever. We can always help you find a league. So our Discord is for our paying members. Our lowest subscription level is $2.99 per month. You get a lot of different stuff with that. But if you want to dip your toes in, you're not really ready to pay yet, you can also reach out to me at C2C Decker, reach out to us at Campus to Canton on Twitter. Either one of us, I'll probably be the one to answer that DM on the Campus to Canton Twitter one anyway, but I'm willing to help you, find a league. If there's something in our Discord that I see that's open, I can connect you with the person who's in there. So, we don't want to be restrictive at all, but our Discord is probably the best place to find the league.
No, you're absolutely right. The Discord is definitely the best place. But if you're interested, like even just making a post on Twitter and tagging Colin or tagging Campus to Canton, say, hey, I'm looking for a league. They can certainly help you guys out and trying to matching you up, if you will. So you decide you want to join a league. Now your next question is, okay, well, what resources are available? Obviously, we've talked about the league softwares where you can go play leagues, but what resources are available for folks interested in Campus to Canton leagues?
Yeah, so this is, again, I don't want to sound like I'm harping too much on how great CampusToCanton.com is, but the origin story of CampusToCanton.com is because there were no other resources out there for these types of leagues at the time. You could find CFF stuff with that CFF site. They're fantastic. You could find NFL stuff all over the place, a bunch of different Devy sites too, but nothing that really married the two. Again, at the risk of sounding too biased, CampusToCanton.com is still the best place for that. We offer extremely extensive rankings from experts on the CFF side, from Devy experts, from people who have been playing Campus to Canton leagues 4, 5, 6 years. We have a lot of a wealth of knowledge there amongst that. We also have tools to help you kind of understand this and look for things on your own, do your own research. So we have a lot of stuff available. We have a lot of free resources too, on our articles, our podcast feed, all geared towards Campus to Canton leagues and some component of it. But there are a lot of other great resources out there as well that are starting up. Fantasy Points is a website. They have Campus to Canton rankings now. They're starting to kind of build that up. Destination Devy is a great Devy resource, and I know they've been big proponents of the Campus to Canton format as a whole. So I believe they have some resources over there too. FF League Winners has stuff as well. They're, I think, mostly articles at this point. I think Devi Royale, kind of the same thing. So there are, plenty of other resources out there that are starting to, plenty of other places out there that are starting to offer more resources as well.
And absolutely, Campus to Canton, in my opinion, is the premier resource for Campus to Canton leagues. And you mentioned that you guys have free stuff, and I would tell you, like, I mean, if you're trying to understand what you're getting into or just learn more, there are a lot of free resources over Campus to Canton. I believe almost every single article is free, right?
Yep.
And then you talk about the podcasts, and it's not just podcasts but YouTube shows, and there is almost a show during the week anyway, a different show every night of the week. And so those are all amazing resources that are free, and for folks to take advantage of. But then you get into the paid stuff, and you get rankings and tools, and the Discord. The Discord is a valuable resource, right? That I don't think folks talk about enough. Just because you have a community of folks that are in playing the same format, have the same questions, dealing with the same issues, etc. And there's a lot of conversations, a lot of good points come out in that Discord, and and for, I don't know, for only $2.99 a month, it's definitely one of the best deals in fantasy, regardless of NFL, college, whatever, that I think you can get anywhere, because you will not find the NFL website, fantasy website, that would offer you the level of tools and resources available for that price. That doesn't exist either. So yeah, definitely.
We want to keep the barrier to entry low. We want people to find this format and discover it and start playing it and fall in love with it the way that we did, and we want to keep that barrier to entry as low as possible, while at the same time acknowledging, like, it takes a lot of time and effort to put these rankings together and develop these tools and write these articles and everything like that. So, $2.99 a month. We wanted to keep it very low. And obviously we have higher tier levels with more access and some more stuff above that and beyond. But it's starting at the $2.99. We wanted to keep it pretty low. So you can check it out. Always reach out to me with any questions as well. I'm always more than happy to help in any way I can.
And you have information like at the higher levels that are good for from a betting perspective, right? Especially a lot of the stuff that Nicholas Ian Allen, CFB Winning Edge, does. He's got depth charts, returning production, all that stuff that's
projections.
That's great. Annual projections that just great for folks that maybe not even into college fantasy football, but they like betting on college football, right? So there's a ton of information available over at Campus to Canton. So, in addition, if you have more questions, feel free to hit me up in my DMs, hit Colin up, and we'd be happy to help you out and tell you what we know and point you in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Colin, I just want to thank you for taking some time out of your day to spend with us and introduce our listeners to Campus to Canton.
Of course, man. I'm excited to be on here. I love what you guys are doing at the G5 Hive, you and Luke. I mean, you are covering topics that have been woefully covered for so long. I mean, Bud Elliott does his summer school, and that's a fantastic series where he's talking with all these beat writers. It's at the, Power 5 level. They're not quite as in-depth as the interviews that you guys are going into. And you're covering all the G5 schools where it can be really difficult to find information on. And then even beyond that, before you guys were doing your Worker Bee series, you're coming out with just general news and notes and talking about G5s and talking about some things that nobody else in the college football media landscape is really talking about. So I really appreciate the opportunity to come on here and talk with you and introduce people to Campus to Canton Leagues, because I think your audience and the people who follow you guys would do really well in a Campus to Canton League. You already know these G5 teams. You would already have a leg up on some of these people coming from the NFL side just by listening to this show, the College Huddle, and the G5 Hive.
All right. If you're looking for more college football content, please check out the lineup of teams over at the College Huddle. They have articles, podcasts, YouTube shows, etc. Plenty of content for the college football fan. And if after all that you want some more G5 college football content, we encourage you to check out our other G5 college football show, the G5 Hive, at G5 Hive on X and YouTube. We're currently actually wrapping up our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive into the G5 college football landscape with the folks that know the teams the best. We interview beat reporters, super fans, school podcasts, and even student reporters to get all the skinny on the G5 teams they cover. The majority of our episodes are now available on the G5 Hive YouTube channel. I think we only have 9 teams. As of today, we have 9 teams left to interview. So you can find them on our YouTube channel. They're also in podcast form on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. This past week, we released episodes with the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers, the Florida Atlantic Owls, the Georgia Southern Eagles, the Old Dominion Monarchs, and the Florida International Panthers. This week coming up, we'll be releasing episodes with the Louisiana Tech Bulldogs, the Kennesaw State Owls, the New Mexico State Aggies, and the Georgia State Panthers. In addition to that, as Colin mentioned earlier in the show, we've been doing a lot of player interviews. This week, we released episodes with South Alabama wide receiver Devin Boson, Eastern Michigan offensive tackle Doji Dawe, and then just this weekend, we released episodes with Troy wide receiver Zariah Beeson and UMass tight end Dominic Mazzotti. So lots of team previews and player interviews there on the G5 Hive to kind of satisfy your college football appetite. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening in podcast form, please rate and review. With that, we wish that all your field goals be right down the middle and that your favorite team always get the W. Until the next time, we are the G5 Huddle.